There are mirrors that show us who we are, and there are mirrors that show us who we were meant to become. But what happens when a mirror shows you something that should not exist? Michael Carter learned the answer to that question on a cold November night, and what he discovered changed everything he thought he knew about life, death, and the thin veil between them. It was 3:17 in the morning when the call came through. St. Mary's General Hospital. Code blue in the emergency bay. Cardiac arrest. Michael had been a paramedic for 11 years. He had seen death more times than he cared to count. He had held the hands of dying patients. He had comforted grieving families. He had learned to build walls around his heart, thick enough to keep working, thin enough to still care. But nothing in his training, nothing in his experience, could have prepared him for what waited for him that night. The ambulance cut through the empty streets of Ashford like a blade through darkness. His partner, Sarah, was driving. Michael sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the sleeping city. The radio crackled with static and distant voices, dispatch codes, other units, other emergencies. The world never stopped bleeding. He rubbed his eyes. Exhaustion had become his constant companion. 3 double shifts this week, his daughter's birthday tomorrow. He had promised her he would be there. He had promised. When they arrived at St. Mary's, the hospital loomed before them like a monument to suffering. 6 floors of fluorescent lights and antiseptic corridors. Michael had been here countless times. He knew every entrance, every hallway, every face behind the nurses' station. But tonight, something felt different. The air tasted metallic, heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. They wheeled the gurney through the automatic doors. The emergency department was unusually quiet. A few patients scattered in the waiting area. Hollow eyes, desperate hope, a mother holding a feverish child, an old man clutching his chest, a teenager with blood seeping through a makeshift bandage, the usual symphony of human fragility. Nurse Henderson met them at the bay entrance. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled slightly as she guided them toward Trauma Room 4. The patient was a man in his mid-60s, gray hair, weathered skin. His name was Thomas Brennan, construction worker. No known allergies, no family present. He had collapsed in the hospital parking lot. A janitor found him. Michael and Sarah moved with practiced precision. Chest compressions, defibrillator, medications. They worked in synchronized silence. Minutes stretched like hours. The heart monitor's flat line screamed its monotone song of ending. Then something impossible happened. As Michael leaned over the patient, administering another round of compressions, he caught his own reflection in the stainless steel cabinet beside the bed. But the reflection was wrong. Terribly wrong. The face staring back at him was not his own. It was older, gaunt, eyes filled with a sorrow so profound it seemed to pull at the edges of reality itself. The reflection's lips moved, speaking words Michael could not hear but somehow understood. "Help me, please, before it is too late." Michael froze. His hands stopped mid-compression. Sarah's voice cut through his paralysis. Michael, keep going." He blinked. The reflection returned to normal. His own face, tired, confused, terrified. He resumed compressions, but his mind raced. What had he just seen? A hallucination? Exhaustion? Or something else entirely? The patient's heart suddenly jolted back to life. A single beep on the monitor, then another. Thomas Brennan gasped. His eyes flew open, wild, searching. His hand shot up and grabbed Michael's wrist with surprising strength. The old man's lips moved. His voice was barely a whisper, raw and urgent. "He is still here. He is trapped. You have to find him. You have to set him free." Then his grip loosened. His eyes rolled back. He slipped into unconsciousness. Michael stepped back. His heart hammered against his ribs. Sarah was already adjusting the IV line. Nurse Henderson recorded vitals. Everyone moved with clinical efficiency. But Michael could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The room felt colder. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper. Alive. They stabilized Thomas and transferred him to intensive care. Michael walked back to the ambulance in a daze. The early morning air bit at his skin. Sarah was filling out paperwork on the hood of the vehicle. She glanced up. "You okay? You looked like you saw a ghost in there." Michael forced a laugh. Just tired. Long shift. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on him with concern. As Michael climbed into the passenger seat, he glanced at the side mirror. His reflection stared back. Normal. Ordinary. But for just a fraction of a second, he thought he saw something else behind him. A figure. Standing in the empty parking lot. Watching. When he turned to look, there was nothing there. Just darkness and the distant hum of the city waking up. The radio crackled again. Another call. Another emergency. Michael took a deep breath and reached for his seatbelt. But a question burned in his mind, refusing to be silenced. What had Thomas Brennan meant? Who was trapped? And why had that impossible reflection spoken to him? He did not know it yet, but finding those answers would lead him into a mystery that stretched back decades. A mystery woven from guilt, love, and a promise broken long ago. Because some reflections do not show us what is. They show us what remains. And sometimes, what remains is waiting for someone brave enough, or foolish enough, to listen. Michael could not sleep. He lay in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling as dawn light crept through the blinds. The encounter at St. Mary's played over and over in his mind like a broken film reel. The reflection that was not his own. The dying man's desperate words. He is still here. He is trapped. What did it mean? Who was trapped? And why had Thomas Brennan looked at him with such urgency, as if Michael was the only person in the world who could help? At noon, after 3 restless hours, Michael gave up on rest. He showered, dressed, and made a decision that surprised even himself. He was going back to St. Mary's, not for work, for answers. He told himself it was concern for a patient, professional follow-up. But deep down, he knew the truth. Something had reached out to him in that trauma room, something that would not let him go. St. Mary's looked different in daylight, less ominous, more ordinary. Just a building filled with sick people and tired staff trying to keep death at bay one shift at a time. Michael entered through the main lobby. The smell hit him immediately. Disinfectant, floor wax, that peculiar scent of illness and industrial cleaning that every hospital shares. He signed in at the visitor desk and took the elevator to the 3rd floor, intensive care unit. The ICU was a world unto itself. Hushed voices, beeping monitors, the mechanical wheeze of ventilators breathing for those who could not breathe alone. Michael approached the nurse's station. A young nurse he did not recognize looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" Michael showed his paramedic badge. "I brought in a patient early this morning. Thomas Brennan. Cardiac arrest." "Just wanted to check on his condition." The nurse typed on her keyboard. Her expression shifted. "Room 312. But you should know, he has been asking for you." Michael felt his pulse quicken. "Asking for me? How would he even know my name?" The nurse shrugged. He woke up around 8. First thing he said was that he needed to talk to the paramedic who saved him. The one with kind eyes. That is what he called you. The paramedic with kind eyes. Michael did not feel kind. He felt confused. Frightened. But he nodded and walked toward room 312. The room was dimly lit. Thomas Brennan lay in the hospital bed, connected to a spider web of tubes and wires. He looked smaller than Michael remembered. Fragile. But his eyes were alert. Sharp. When he saw Michael enter, something like relief washed over his weathered face. "You came. Thank God you came." Michael pulled a chair close to the bed. "Mr. Brennan, I am Michael. Michael Carter. I was one of the paramedics who treated you. How are you feeling?" Thomas waved away the question with a trembling hand. "How I feel does not matter anymore. What matters is what I need to tell you before it is too late. Before he fades completely." Michael leaned forward. "Who are you talking about? Who is trapped?" Thomas closed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with decades of buried pain. His name was Daniel. Daniel Merrick. He was a patient here. 32 years ago. I was working maintenance, night shift. I was the last person to see him alive. And I did nothing. I did absolutely nothing. The old man's words hung in the air like smoke. Michael felt the hairs on his arms stand up. What happened to Daniel Merrick? Thomas opened his eyes. Tears traced lines down his weathered cheeks. He was young, maybe 25. Car accident, broken ribs, internal bleeding. They brought him in on a Friday night. I was mopping the floor in the east wing. Second floor, room 218. I heard him calling for help. His call button was not working, faulty wiring. I knew the hospital had budget cuts. I knew equipment was failing, but I was tired. It was the end of my shift. I thought the nurses would check on him soon, so I walked away. I finished mopping. I clocked out. I went home. Michael felt a chill spread through his chest. And Thomas's voice broke. He died that night, alone, calling for help that never came. Internal hemorrhaging. By the time the morning nurse found him, it was too late. If I had just stopped, if I had just gotten a nurse, if I had stayed with him for even 5 minutes, he might still be alive. I have carried that guilt for 32 years. It has eaten me from the inside out. And now, he is reaching out. He wants something. I do not know what. But last night, when I collapsed in the parking lot, I saw him, standing over me, staring down at me with empty eyes. Michael did not know what to say. Part of him wanted to dismiss this as the rambling of a traumatized elderly man, guilt-induced hallucinations. But he could not forget his own experience, the reflection, the voice. Help me, please, before it is too late. What if Thomas was telling the truth? What if something of Daniel Merrick remained, trapped between worlds, searching for resolution? Michael spoke carefully. Mr. Brennan, why do you think he appeared to me? Why would I see him in that reflection? Thomas gripped the bed rail. Because you are like him, kind, willing to help. Daniel was a teacher, elementary school. Everyone said he was gentle, patient. He cared about people. When you were doing compressions on me, fighting to save my life, maybe he saw that same kindness in you. Maybe he thinks you can do what I failed to do all those years ago. What do I need to do? The question left Michael's lips before he could stop it. Thomas looked at him with desperate hope. Go to room 218, second floor, east wing. It is a storage room now. They stopped using it for patients 20 years ago. People say it feels wrong, cold. Staff avoid it. But if Daniel is anywhere, he is there, waiting. Go there. Listen. Maybe he will tell you what he needs. Maybe you can give him the peace I stole from him. Michael stood. His legs felt unsteady. This was insane. He should walk away. Go home. Forget this whole thing. But something deeper than logic pulled at him. A sense of purpose, of duty. He had spent 11 years saving lives. What if he could save something else? What if he could free a soul that had been trapped for 3 decades in loneliness and despair? He looked at Thomas. I will go. Tonight, after visiting Hour's End. Thomas nodded. Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you for listening. Most people would think I am crazy. Michael left the ICU and took the stairs to the second floor. He found the east wing easily. The corridor was older than the rest of the hospital. The paint was faded, the lighting dimmer. He walked until he found room 218. The door was unmarked. He tried the handle. Locked. A janitor passed by, pushing a cart. Michael stopped him. Excuse me, do you have a key for this room? The janitor, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, glanced at the door and shook his head. That room? Nobody goes in there, man. Gives people the creeps. Cold spots. Strange sounds. I have worked here 15 years and I have never once cleaned it. Why do you want in? Michael hesitated. Just curious. The janitor studied him for a moment, then shrugged. Your funeral. He pulled a ring of keys from his belt and unlocked the door. But I am not going in with you. Michael thanked him and watched him hurry away, as if the door itself was dangerous. Michael stood alone in the dim hallway. Behind him, the sounds of the hospital continued. Distant voices, rolling gurneys, the hum of machines. But in front of him, beyond that door, there was only silence. Deep. Waiting. He put his hand on the doorknob. It was ice cold. He took a breath, and then he pushed the door open. The room was freezing, not cool, not cold. Freezing. Michael's breath came out in visible clouds. The temperature drop was immediate and unnatural. He fumbled for the light switch. The fluorescent bulbs flickered reluctantly to life, casting a sickly yellow glow over the space. The room was filled with old hospital equipment, rusted IV stands, broken wheelchairs, stacks of outdated medical charts covered in dust. Everything was coated in a thick layer of neglect, but it was the silence that unsettled him most, the complete absence of sound, as if the room existed outside the normal flow of the hospital, outside the normal flow of time itself. Michael stepped inside. The door swung shut behind him with a heavy click. He spun around and tried the handle. It would not turn. Locked. His heart rate spiked. Stay calm. There is a rational explanation. Old door. Faulty mechanism. He would call maintenance. But even as he formed these thoughts, he knew they were lies he was telling himself to keep the rising panic at bay. A sound broke the silence. Soft at first. A rhythmic beeping. Like a heart monitor. But there was no equipment plugged in. No power source. The beeping grew louder, faster, more urgent. Then it flatlined. That terrible monotone scream of death. Michael turned in a slow circle, trying to locate the source. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from inside the walls, from inside his own head. Then he saw it. In the corner of the room, partially hidden behind a pile of broken gurneys, stood a mirror. Large, ornate, old-fashioned. It did not belong here. It looked like something from a mansion, not a hospital storage room. The glass was tarnished and spotted with age. Michael approached it slowly. His reflection appeared in the dim light. But it was wrong again. Just like in the trauma room. The face staring back was not his own. It was a young man, mid-20s, dark hair, gentle eyes that now burned with something between sorrow and desperation. His lips moved. This time, Michael heard the words. They echoed in the cold air, hollow and broken. Why did no one come? I called and called. I pushed the button. I screamed until my voice gave out. Why did no one come? The reflection's hand pressed against the glass from the inside, as if trying to break through, trying to reach out. Michael's voice shook. Daniel? Daniel Merrick? The reflection stopped moving. The eyes focused on him with sudden intensity. You know my name? Someone remembers my name. Michael took a step closer. I know what happened to you. I know about Thomas Brennan. I know he heard you calling and he walked away. I am so sorry. No one should die alone like that. No one should be abandoned when they need help most. The reflection's face twisted with anguish. 32 years. 32 years I have been here. Trapped in this room, in this moment. Feeling my life drain away. Calling for help that never comes. Over and over. An endless loop of dying alone. Do you know what that does to a soul? Do you know what it means to be forgotten? To be erased? As if your life meant nothing? As if your death meant even less? Michael felt tears burning in his eyes. What do you need? How can I help you? The reflection stared at him, not with anger, with something far more devastating. Confusion. Loss. I do not know anymore. I thought I needed someone to answer my call. I thought I needed Thomas to face what he did. But he is dying too now. And that does not make me feel better. It does not ease this pain. Revenge is not what I want. Forgiveness is not what I want. I just want to stop existing in this moment. I want to move on. But I do not know how. Michael understood then. This was not a haunting driven by malice. It was a haunting driven by incompletion. Daniel Merrick was stuck because his last moments were defined by abandonment, by unanswered cries, by the fundamental human need for connection being denied. He died believing he did not matter enough for anyone to stay, and that belief had anchored his spirit to this room like chains. Michael made a choice. He walked directly to the mirror. He placed his hand against the cold glass. He could feel something on the other side, a presence, desperate, fading. Michael spoke clearly, firmly. Daniel Merrick. I hear you. I am here. You are not alone. Your call has been answered. The reflection's eyes widened. Michael continued. You were a teacher. You spent your life helping children. You were kind. You were patient. You mattered to so many people. Your death was a tragedy, but it does not define your existence. You are more than this moment. You are more than this pain. But the reflection shook his head violently. You do not understand. It is too late. I have been here too long. I have forgotten what it feels like to be anything other than afraid. Anything other than alone. I do not think I can leave. I do not think I remember how. The temperature in the room plummeted further. Frost began to form on the mirror's surface. Michael could see his breath crystallizing in the air. The lights flickered, dimmed. The beeping sound returned, faster and more chaotic. Then something shifted in the reflection. Daniel's face changed. The sorrow twisted into something darker. Rage, bitterness. If I am trapped here forever, why should Thomas be free? Why should he get to die peacefully after what he did to me? Why should anyone who walks away from suffering get to sleep soundly at night? The mirror began to crack, thin fractures spreading across the glass like spiderwebs. Michael felt a pressure building in the room, a malevolent energy. This was the turning point, the moment where a suffering spirit could become something dangerous, something vengeful. Michael did not step back. He pressed his hand harder against the glass. Listen to me, Daniel. Thomas has suffered too. He has carried guilt for 32 years. It has destroyed him. He collapsed in the same parking lot where you died. He is in intensive care right now, barely clinging to life. His punishment has been a lifetime of self-hatred. Is that not enough? The reflection hesitated. The cracks stopped spreading. Michael pushed forward. And more than that, making him suffer more will not free you. Hatred will not break these chains. Only release will. Only letting go. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. How do I let go? How do I forgive the unforgivable? Michael thought of every patient he had lost, every person he could not save. The weight of those failures, the guilt, the what-ifs that haunted his quiet moments. He spoke from that place of shared pain. You start by forgiving yourself, for being human, for being vulnerable, for needing help. There is no shame in that. You did nothing wrong. You were a victim of circumstance, of a faulty system, of one man's exhaustion. But you do not have to be a victim forever. The reflection looked at him with something like hope flickering in those desperate eyes. But the room was growing darker, the cold more intense. Something else was happening, something Michael had not anticipated. The mirror was not just showing Daniel's reflection anymore. It was showing something behind Michael. A shadow, growing, taking shape. Michael turned slowly. His blood turned to ice. Standing in the doorway that had been locked moments ago was a figure. Tall, shrouded, faceless. And it was moving toward him. Michael froze. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The figure moved with unnatural fluidity, silent, deliberate. As it drew closer, the temperature dropped so severely that Michael's fingers began to go numb. His teeth chattered. The figure stopped 3 feet away, and then it spoke. Not with a voice, with a presence that filled Michael's mind like ice water. You should not be here. This is not your burden to carry. This is not your death to witness. Michael found his voice. Who are you? The figure tilted its head. The absence of features made the gesture somehow more disturbing. I am what remains when compassion dies. I am the consequence of turning away. I have been waiting for Thomas Brennan for 32 years, and tonight, I will finally claim what is mine. Michael's mind raced. This was not Daniel. This was something else, something that had grown in the darkness of this room, fed by rage and abandonment and endless suffering. The reflection in the mirror spoke again. Daniel's voice, but weaker now, distant. Michael, listen to me. That thing is not me. It never was. It is what I created, what my anger and pain birthed in this place. I have been fighting it for decades, trying to keep it contained, but I am so tired. And tonight, when Thomas collapsed, it grew stronger. It wants to drag him into this darkness, to make him suffer the way I suffered. And I do not know if I can stop it anymore. Michael turned back to the mirror, his hand still pressed against the cold glass. Then we stop it together. Daniel, you said you forgot how to be anything other than afraid. But fear is not all you are. You were a teacher. You protected children. You gave them knowledge and kindness. That power is still inside you. That light is still there. You just have to remember. The reflection looked at him with hollow eyes. I do not know if there is enough light left. I have been in the dark so long. The shadowy figure moved closer. Michael could feel its presence like a weight on his chest. Suffocating. It spoke again directly into his mind. Thomas Brennan will die tonight. And when he does, his soul will join me in this room. 2 prisoners instead of 1. An eternity of regret and punishment. That is justice. That is balance. Michael shook his head. That is not justice. That is perpetuating the cycle of pain. If you take Thomas, you become exactly what destroyed Daniel. You become the thing that abandons compassion when someone needs it most. The figure stopped. For the first time, it seemed uncertain. Michael pressed forward. Daniel Merrick died because one man made a choice born from exhaustion and human weakness. But that man has paid for it every day since, and Daniel has paid even more. How many more years of suffering will be enough? How much punishment balances the scales? When does it end? The figure remained silent, but Michael could feel its anger, its hunger. It did not want logic, it wanted vengeance. Then the reflection spoke, and what it said changed everything. Michael, there is something Thomas did not tell you, something I only learned after I died, after I saw everything. The night I died, Thomas was not just tired. He was not just at the end of his shift. Michael felt his stomach tighten. What do you mean? Daniel's reflection looked directly at him. Thomas's daughter was in the hospital that same night. 4th floor, pediatric oncology. She was 9 years old. Leukemia. She had taken a turn for the worse. Critical condition. The doctors told him he should be with her, that it might be his last chance to say goodbye. Michael felt the ground shift beneath him. No, that cannot be true. Thomas said he went home. Daniel continued. He lied. Or maybe he has convinced himself of that version over the years. But the truth is, when he heard me calling from room 218, he was on his way to see his daughter. He was running, panicked, desperate. He heard me. He knew someone needed help, but his child was dying 4 floors above. And he made a choice. He kept running. Not out of laziness, not out of indifference, out of the most fundamental human instinct. To be with his child in her final moments. Michael could barely breathe. Did she survive? His daughter? Daniel's voice cracked. No. She died 20 minutes after he reached her room. He held her hand as she passed. She was not alone. But I was. We both lost everything that night. The only difference is he got to say goodbye. And I did not. The shadowy figure shuddered. Its form flickered, like static. Michael understood now. This entire situation was built on incomplete information, on assumptions, on the narrative they had constructed without knowing the full truth. Michael spoke to the darkness. You wanted Thomas to suffer because you thought he valued his convenience over Daniel's life. But that is not what happened. He valued his daughter's final moments. If you were in his position, what would you have chosen? Your duty to a stranger? Or your last chance to hold your child? The figure did not respond, but its presence began to waver, to diminish. Michael turned to the mirror. And Daniel, if you had known the truth that night, if you had known Thomas was running to his dying daughter, would you have wanted him to stop? Would you have asked him to sacrifice those final moments with her to sit with you instead? The reflection was crying now. Silent tears that should not be possible for a ghost, for something caught between worlds. No, I would not have asked that of him. I would never ask that of anyone. I spent my life teaching children. I loved them. If I had known, I would have told him to run faster, to not waste a single second, to hold her tight and tell her she was loved. Michael felt his own tears falling. Then you understand. What happened was not cruelty. It was tragedy. Pure, senseless, unavoidable. 2 lives ended that night for reasons beyond anyone's control. But continuing to punish Thomas will not resurrect you. It will not bring back his daughter. It will only add more death to the ledger. The shadowy figure began to collapse inward, disintegrating, Its voice echoed one final time. Hollow. Defeated. Lost. Then what was the point? Why did any of this happen? Why do we suffer for no reason? Why does compassion have to choose between two equally desperate needs? Michael had no answer. Because there was no answer. Only the terrible truth that the world is often unbearably cruel. That good people face impossible choices. That sometimes everyone loses and there is no villain to blame. Only circumstance, only fate, only the merciless randomness of existence. The figure dissolved completely. The temperature began to rise. The oppressive weight lifted from the room. Michael looked at the mirror. Daniel's reflection was fading, becoming translucent, peaceful. Michael, thank you. For listening. For caring enough to come here. For showing me the truth I was too angry to see. I do not know what happens next. But I think I can leave now. I think I can finally let go. Michael pressed his hand against the glass one last time. You mattered, Daniel. Your life mattered. Your death mattered. And you will be remembered. Not as a victim, but as someone who chose compassion even after death. Even after being given every reason to become a monster. The reflection smiled. Small. Sad. Real. Tell Thomas I forgive him. Tell him his daughter is proud of him. Tell him it is time to forgive himself. And then the mirror went dark. Empty. Showing only Michael's own reflection. Exhausted. Shaken. But somehow lighter. The door behind him clicked open. Unlocked. He walked out into the hallway. The hospital sounds returned. Normal. Ordinary. The world continuing as if nothing had happened. But Michael knew better. Everything had happened. Everything had changed. Michael returned to the intensive care unit. It was nearly midnight. The hospital was at its quietest. The graveyard shift. That liminal time when the boundary between life and death feels paper thin. He walked past the nurse's station without stopping. They were too busy with charts and medication rounds to notice him. Room 312. The door was slightly ajar. Soft light spilled into the hallway. Michael pushed it open gently. Thomas Brennan was awake, staring at the ceiling. His face was gray, sunken. The machines around him beeped steadily, but without enthusiasm, as if they too knew this was temporary. A brief reprieve before the inevitable. When Thomas saw Michael, something flickered in his tired eyes. Relief, fear, hope. You went to the room. I can see it on your face. You saw him. Michael nodded and pulled the chair close to the bed. His voice was soft. I did. And he told me everything, including the part you left out. Thomas closed his eyes. Tears leaked from the corners. My daughter. Emma. You know about Emma. Michael reached out and took the old man's hand. It was cold. Fragile. Yes. I know. Daniel showed me the truth. You were not walking away from him because you did not care. You were running toward your dying child. Thomas's voice broke into pieces. But it does not change what happened. Daniel still died alone. Emma still died. I lost them both that night. 2 souls on my conscience. How do I live with that? How does anyone live with that? Michael squeezed his hand gently. You live with it by understanding that you are human. That you were placed in an impossible situation with no good options. You could not save both of them. So you chose the one your heart demanded you choose. Your child. Any parent would have done the same. Thomas shook his head. But a good person would have stopped. Would have gotten help for Daniel first. Would have sacrificed those extra minutes. Michael spoke firmly now. A good person would have been torn apart by that decision. Just like you have been for 32 years. But making the choice you made does not make you evil. It makes you human. And humans break under the weight of impossible choices. Thomas opened his eyes. They were filled with decades of pain. Did he say anything? Daniel? Did he curse me? Did he tell you what a monster I am? Michael felt his throat tighten. He said to tell you that he forgives you, that if he had known about Emma, he would have told you to run faster, that he understands, and that it is time for you to forgive yourself. Thomas stared at him in disbelief. That cannot be true. After everything, after I abandoned him, how could he forgive me? Michael thought about Daniel's reflection, the anger that had twisted into something dark and consuming. And then the moment of clarity, the choice to release rather than destroy. He spoke carefully, because holding on to that anger was destroying him, literally trapping him in that room for over 3 decades. And he realized that vengeance would not bring him peace. Only letting go could do that. Only choosing compassion over punishment, even when punishment felt justified. Thomas was crying openly now, silent sobs that shook his frail body. Michael continued. He also said that Emma is proud of you, that you did the right thing by being with her in those final moments, that she never blamed you for anything. Thomas's heart monitor began to beep irregularly, faster, then slower. The old man's breathing became labored. Michael stood up, ready to call for help, but Thomas gripped his wrist with surprising strength. No. Let me say this first. I have been carrying this guilt like chains for so long. I thought it was my penance, my punishment. But maybe it was never about punishment. Maybe it was about learning that life is not fair. That tragedy does not always have a villain. That sometimes we are all just doing our best in circumstances beyond our control. Michael nodded. That is exactly right. And now you can let it go. Both of you can finally be free. Thomas smiled weakly. It is strange. I thought I would be more afraid of dying. But right now, I just feel tired. And maybe a little bit of peace. Thank you, Michael. For going into that room. For listening. For caring about an old man's confession. For giving me permission to forgive myself. Michael felt tears on his own cheeks. You are welcome. And Thomas, when you see Emma again, tell her she was loved every single day. Tell her you never stopped being her father, even when she was gone. The old man's eyes began to close. I will, I promise. And I will tell Daniel too. That someone remembered him, that someone cared enough to set him free. The monitors began to flatline. Nurses rushed in. Michael stepped back against the wall and watched them work, but he knew it was over. Thomas Brennan had held on just long enough to receive the forgiveness he had sought for 32 years, and now he could finally rest. The attending physician called the time of death, 12:43 a.m. Michael slipped out of the room quietly. No one noticed him leave. He walked through the empty corridors, past room 218. The door was open now. He glanced inside. The mirror was gone. Just an empty storage room filled with forgotten equipment. Nothing supernatural, nothing tragic. Just a space waiting to be filled with something new. Michael left St. Mary's Hospital as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. He sat in his car for a long moment, thinking about Daniel Merrick, about Thomas Brennan, about Emma, about all the lives that intersect in moments of crisis, about the impossible choices people face and the weight they carry afterward. He thought about his own work. 11 years of trying to save people, sometimes succeeding, often failing, and the guilt that came with every loss. But maybe that guilt was not meant to destroy him. Maybe it was meant to remind him that every life mattered, that every moment counted, that compassion was not weakness. It was the only thing that made any of this bearable. He started his car and drove home. His daughter would be awake soon, her birthday. He had promised to be there, and he would keep that promise, because that was what mattered. Being present for the people who needed you, not out of obligation, but out of love. And when the impossible choices came, when the world demanded that you choose between two equally important needs, you made the best decision you could. And then you learned to live with it, not by forgetting, but by forgiving yourself and others, again and again, as many times as it took. Have you ever thought about the ghosts you carry? The moments when you walked away because you had to? The people you could not save because saving them would have cost you something you could not afford to lose? Those memories do not make you a monster. They make you human. And being human means living in the tension between who we want to be and who we are capable of being in our worst moments. Daniel Merrick learned to forgive the unforgivable. Thomas Brennan learned to accept grace he did not think he deserved. What will you learn when your own reflection shows you the truth you have been avoiding? Share your thoughts below. Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit that we are all just trying our best. And that has to be enough. In the end, perhaps the real miracle was fear.